In 1993, Coca-Cola, the world's most powerful cola company on earth, purchased Thums Up, India's most popular cola, and then tried to kill it. But they learnt a valuable lesson. You don't mess with Indians. Coca-Cola did everything they could to destroy Thums Up. They slashed its advertising budget. While they were spending 200 crore rupees on promoting Coca-Cola every year, guess how much they were spending on Thums Up? 1.8 crore rupees. 200 crores versus 1.8 crores. That alone should have been enough to destroy the brand. But they went several steps further. They cut its production. They pulled it from the shelves. Coca-Cola's plan was clean and it was ruthless. Remove every Indian brand and replace it with your own. So they systematically pulled the plug on all the Indian homegrown brands that they'd purchased. Brands that Coca-Cola considered competition. Gold Spot, gone. Citra, gone. Limca, barely breathing. But Thums Up turned out to be the David that this Goliath had been too dismissive about. They have one singular problem. Indians did not simply switch to Coca-Cola. They realized what Coca-Cola was doing, and to retaliate, they switched instead to Pepsi. Coca-Cola had spent $60 million to acquire Thums Up and its cousins in India, only to discover, at enormous cost, that you cannot simply buy a country's loyalty and then choose not to honor it. The cola they tried to kill is today a billion-dollar brand. It outsells Coca-Cola completely in India, just as it had for decades. It was created in a laboratory in Mumbai by an MIT graduate with an instinctive understanding of India. His name was Mr. Ramesh Chauhan. And this is the story of how one man bottled a nation's pride and called it Thunder. Welcome, I'm Arvind Vijay Mohan. And today we are going deep into one of the most extraordinary business stories India has ever produced. A story about colonial hangovers and political fire. About a vacuum that became an empire. About a brand that survived everything a global giant could throw at it because it had something no amount of money could manufacture. It tasted like India. This is the story of Thums Up. To understand what Thums Up is, you first need to understand what happened in India in 1977. And to understand that, you need to go back slightly further to a piece of legislation called the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, FERA. Passed in 1973, it required foreign companies operating in India to dilute the equity in their Indian operations, to hand over voluntarily 60% of their local subsidiary to Indian partners. Now, most multinationals grumbled but complied. They found a way somehow or the other to work with it. Coca-Cola did not, because FERA wasn't the only demand being made of them. The then industry minister, a firebrand socialist named George Fernandez, one of the most combustible personalities in Indian political history, wanted something more from them. He wanted Coca-Cola to hand over 60% of its Indian equity, but he also wanted them to share their formula, their secret recipe, the one thing that the company had guarded with its life since 1886, the thing they had never shared with anyone, anywhere, under any circumstance. So Coca-Cola said no. They didn't negotiate, they didn't propose some sort of compromise. They said, we will not share our formula, and they left. And so in 1977, Coca-Cola, which had been in India nearly since the then young nation's independence, since 1949, which had become as omnipresent as the country's infrastructure, packed up and exited the market entirely. Along with them went 56 other multinational companies, including IBM, Mobil, and Kodak, all gone rather than comply. George Fernandez, in an interview years later with the New York Times, explained his thinking rather plainly. He said, when I chucked Coca-Cola out in 77, I made the point that 90% of India's villages did not even have safe drinking water, whereas Coke was reaching every single village. Do we really need Coke when we don't have water? Do we need Pepsi? Now you can agree with him or disagree with him, but what he created, almost entirely by accident, was the most significant commercial opportunity in Indian beverage history. So one fine morning, there was no cola in the country. The stream had run completely dry. The government tried to step in and fill the gap. They launched a state-backed substitute called 77, named somewhat on the nose after the year 1977. It failed. It tasted by most accounts like a punishment. Campo Cola appeared, it was made by Pure Drinks, and it did somewhat better, but it lacked something. You see, it never had the thunder. Into this fizzless chamber walked a man from Vilepale in Mumbai. He had studied at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He'd returned to India at the age of 22 and set up a bottling plant. He had already, through his family's company, Parle, developed two successful soft drinks. Limca, a lime lemon drink, and Gold Spot, an orange drink. He had a nose the taste buds, and most importantly, the instinct for what India wanted to drink. In 1977, Ramesh Chauhan looked at the gap where Coca-Cola used to sit almost monopolistically and proclaimed, "I'm going to take over, and I'm going to do that by building something better for Indians by an Indian." What Chauhan understood, and this is the insight that made everything explode, was that the gap left by Coca-Cola was not just a distribution gap, it was a taste gap. Indian consumers, you see, had developed a palate for cola over nearly 3 decades of Coca-Cola's presence here. But Coca-Cola had never been designed for the Indian palate. It had been designed in Atlanta for an American market in the 19th century. It was sweet. It was mild by Indian standards. It was carbonated to the taste of the Western palate for America, a country whose spice tolerance was in most cases almost entirely negligible. India was a country that ate food that would hospitalize most of the Western world because of its spice, that would turn their rectums into fire-breathing dragons. Apologies for that, I could not resist. Chauhan's question was simple but radical. What does a cola taste like if it's actually built for India? He went into his lab and he started experimenting. His goal was a drink that was bolder and spicier than Coca-Cola, with a stronger hit of carbonation that would hold even when the bottle was not ice cold. Now this detail that no one had even considered matters enormously. India in 1977 did not have reliable refrigeration across the country. If you wanted a drink that could be sold by a vendor on a street corner, in the sun, in the heat, in the middle of a summer that would strip paint off a car, it had to be fizzy without being cold. It had to carry its own thunder. He experimented with cinnamon, with cardamom, with nutmeg, the same spices that had been at the heart of Indian cooking and Indian trade for centuries. He wasn't trying to make a replica of Coca-Cola, you see. He was trying to make something that Coca-Cola had missed entirely, something that had never yet existed. A cola that tasted like it came from here, an Indian cola. Now, its name. Ever wonder about its spelling? Or rather, its misspelling. It's not Thums Up, it's Thums Up. So when Mr. Ramesh Chauhan and his team at Parle were finalizing the name, they had settled upon Thums Up, the correctly spelled title for a universal signal of approval. It was straightforward and optimistic. But there was a registration concern that his lawyers pointed out. Thums Up, you see, was too generic a phrase to trademark cleanly, too close to common language to be owned entirely. So they came up with a solution that was simple and slightly audacious. Just simply drop the B. So it became Thums Up. The logo still showing a raised thumb, the gesture remaining unchanged, but the word now unmistakably its own thing. A deliberate misspelling that became one of the most recognized brand names of the subcontinent, making the ordinary unforgettable. That now iconic red thumbs up gesture unmistakable from across the street, from the window of a fast-moving train. Now what happened next is one of those market stories that people in business schools still study to this day. Thums Up didn't just fill the gap, it consumed it. By the early 1980s, it had achieved something close to a monopoly in the Indian cola market. Now this wasn't because of a heavy advertising budget or massive celebrity endorsements or some global marketing campaign. It was simply because the product was perfectly right. Because every auto rickshaw driver and every college student and every office worker who ever cracked open a bottle and felt that hit of cold fizz and spice came back for another one. Thums Up understood something about its country that a company in Atlanta, Georgia never had or could. Throughout the 1980s, while Coca-Cola sat on the sidelines, Thums Up silently built India. It sponsored cricket. It put Mr. Sunil Gavaskar and Mr. Imran Khan, Indian and Pakistani cricket legends, two men from countries that weren't always at peace, on the same postcard, advertising the same drink. Then came their next master move, the Maha Cola. Now in the early 1980s, the standard soft drink bottle at that time held 250 milliliters, the inherited size, the industry norm, the glass bottle that everyone assumed was simply the correct container for a cold drink. Thums Up looked at that size and asked, why? And then they went ahead and changed that assumption. They introduced a 300 milliliter bottle. Not just any cola, the Maha Cola bottle. 50 milliliters more, but at the same price. making it the largest soft drink bottle available in the Indian market at the time. The name was direct and entirely unsubtle. By design, Maha in Sanskrit and Hindi means great or large. Maha Cola was simply the big cola, just more cola for the same price. The timing was perfectly shrewd. Competition from Camper Cola had pushed Thums Up to find a reason to be chosen, and they found it not just in a new formula or a celebrity endorsement, but in the container itself. In a country where a thumbs up was often shared, where a cold drink in the heat of a North Indian summer was considered a transaction rather than some casual purchase, 50 extra milliliters was not a trivial offer. It was immediately noticed. You have to understand the significance of this Maha Cola. Sure, its impact was economic, but it was also social. In a village shop or a roadside dhaba where refrigeration was scarce and a drink had to work hard to justify its price, a single bottle often stood in for refreshment for 2, sometimes even 3 people. Picture this. It would arrive beaded with condensation, opened with a practice flick against a metal edge, that satisfying sound of the cola announcing itself to everyone. And then the bottle was passed around, each person taking a measured sip. The extra 50 milliliters stretched this social moment. It meant there was more than enough to go around without negotiation between everyone present. In these smaller towns, people stopped asking for Thums Up by name. They just simply asked for Maha Cola. The product had replaced the category. Then 1991 arrived. India opened its economy. The liberalization policies of Prime Minister Mr. Narasimha Rao and Finance Minister Mr. Mohan Singh dismantled the walls that had kept multinational companies out. PepsiCo, which had cleverly entered India in 1989 through a regulatory workaround, was already on the ground, with some market edge already in place. Coca-Cola had been eagerly waiting to pounce back into the ring. In 1993, Thums Up still held 85% of the Indian cola market, right when Coca-Cola returned with a loud bang. And they came back not with a better product, they came back with a cunning strategy. Mr. Chauhan, for all the instinct and understanding of the Indian market that he displayed, had made one miscalculation, a major one. He had built his entire bottling network on a franchise model. He owned only 4 plants himself. The remainder bottling plants, 58 in all, were franchises, all independent businesses. And Coca-Cola, with its global resources, its global contracts, its global promise of partnership, began to approach those franchises one by one systematically. Come with us, they told them, luring them with the promise of global growth. The future will remain with us, the global brand. When Chauhan saw what was happening, his entire distribution network being quietly dismantled from right beneath his feet, he understood that the battle was already over. Even if he tried, he could not fight Coca-Cola for the bottlers. He didn't have the resources, he didn't have the scale. He could have fought it for the sake of it, but he was always the smartest man in the room. And so, in September 1993, Mr. Ramesh Chauhan sold Thums Up along with Limca, Gold Spot, Maaza and Citra to Coca-Cola for $60 million. What Coca-Cola did next, however, is one of the most epic corporate catastrophes in the history of Indian business. Coca-Cola's plan was surgical and deliberate. Think of this as a montage of a carefully planned set of hits against anyone who stood against the family in The Godfather. They killed Gold Spot immediately. It competed with Fanta. They killed Citra. It competed with Sprite. They slashed Thums Up's advertising budget in 1995 to 1.8 crore rupees. In the same year, when they were spending 200 crores on Coca-Cola, a ratio of more than 100:1. They cut its supply in markets where it was strongest. They pulled it from the shelves. They tried to make it starve. But this is where they made their greatest miscalculation. Indian consumers noticed. And they did what Indian consumers have always done when someone underestimates them. They made their own choice. When Thums Up disappeared from the shelves, the Indian consumer didn't simply switch to Coca-Cola. The Indian consumer realized what Coca-Cola had been doing. And in response, they walked past Coca-Cola right to the next shelf and bought Pepsi instead. Coca-Cola's market share collapsed. The brand that they had bought to control the Indian market was, it turned out, the only reason Coca-Cola had a market at all. In 1997, Coca-Cola, finally revived Thums Up. They didn't do it graciously, mind you. They did it because they knew they had no choice. But what happened after the revival is the part that is most extraordinary. Because what the Indian market taught one of the most powerful companies in the world is a lesson that no business school curriculum can fully prepare you for. You cannot manufacture belonging. Thums Up was not just any cola. It was a personality. It was the drink that said, I am not delicate. I do not need to be handled carefully. I'm built for this country, for this heat, for this noise, for this life. That tagline, Taste the Thunder, was not some marketing line. It was a declaration. The brand was sensibly rebuilt around exactly that by Coca-Cola. The masculinity, the boldness, the pride of something that was made here, for here, by someone who understands what here feels like. And India came back with genuine, deep, almost stubborn loyalty. Today, Thums Up controls 42% of the Indian cola market. It became a billion-dollar brand in 2021. It still outsells Coca-Cola in the country where Coca-Cola spent $60 million to buy it. There is a peak in the Manmad Hills in Maharashtra. It's a natural rock formation visible from passing trains that the local people have taken to calling Thums Up Mountain. Not because anyone asked them to, because it is shaped like the logo. Because the logo has been part of their landscape for so long that when nature produced something that remotely resembled it, they recognized it immediately and claimed it. That is not brand loyalty. That is something older and far deeper than simply brand loyalty. That is a country seeing itself in a bottle. I keep thinking about that marketing budget. 1.8 crores for Thums Up, 200 crores for Coca-Cola in the same year by the same company. And despite that disillusioning disparity, the Indian market looked at that and said, no, this wasn't simply protest or patriotism. It was because the taste of Thums Up was spot on correct. You see, when you grow up with something, when a flavor becomes the flavor of summer, of cricket, of crowded streets and train journeys and exam results and celebrations, no amount of advertising from any direction can reach deep enough to move it. You can't simply win over a deeply embedded emotion by throwing money at it. This story goes well beyond business. It's about what happens when a product is genuinely designed for a specific people in a specific place with specific tastes and specific lives, rather than designed somewhere else and just imported as a standard offering. It wasn't because the strategy of Thums Up was brilliant that it succeeded in the 1980s. It was because Mr. Ramesh Chauhan actually thought about what a person in Delhi or Bombay or some small town in Tamil Nadu, standing in that heat, actually wanted to feel when he opened a cold drink. He thought about that person, and then he made something for them. Coca-Cola, when they returned in 93, thought about market share, about distribution, about global brand architecture, about everything except that specific person standing in that specific heat, reaching for that specific bottle. And that was what they missed. Building something that felt like it was made for their hand. Thums Up taught the world's most powerful beverage company something that 100 years of corporate strategy hadn't even reached. That loyalty is not something you acquire, it's something you earn. That is the thunder of loyalty. This was the story of India's favorite cola. And I'm Arvind Vijay Mohan, and I'll continue bringing such mind-blowing stories to you every week.